I'll be here, Angela Voza, helping you start your search for scholarships as well as continuing your look at financial aid. A little about me. I have spent the past 2 years as a college advisor through the college advising course. So I helped many students find scholarships, apply for scholarships, look more at their financial aid packages and all of that. So I'm here to hopefully share some of that information with you, answer some of your questions before you get started on your search, and all of that fun stuff. Just if you do have questions come up throughout the session, there's multiple places you can submit, get link to submit them. First, you'll see QR codes on some of the slides. Additionally, the link to our Mentimeter, which we're using to collect questions, is going to be in the description of this video as well as in the discussion thread underneath. So with that, let's get started. So first, today is being hosted by Fiveable. Make sure you connect with Fiveable on their different social media outlets. You can see the different ones they have here as well as their username to connect with them. So the agenda for today, we're going to start with some time on just beginning your scholarship search and going over some of the things you should take into consideration as you determine what scholarships you are going to apply for. Next, we're going to focus some time on putting together your actual applications for scholarships. I'm going to give you some tips on what things you need to collect, what timelines you should use, as well as we're going to focus a good portion of that time on your scholarship essay and the things you want to take into consideration as you start putting that together. Finally, we're going to end with just discussing some of the other forms of financial aid that you can use to help fund your college education next year. Specifically, we're going to be focusing on grants, which are another form of free money for your college, as well as work study and the things you need to prepare to do to get that aid. So without further ado, starting your scholarship search. So in this section, I'm hoping to answer a couple main questions. Specifically, I'm going to give you some places to find your scholarships. I'll give you the tools to verify a scholarship and make sure a scholarship is reliable and not a scam. And finally, I'm going to show you how I helped my students keep their scholarships organized so they can make sure they submit everything by the deadline and keep track of which ones they've finished and which ones they still need to do. With scholarships, I've identified really 3 main places for you to find them. The first place would be at colleges. So the colleges you're applying to and eventually going to will have a variety of different academic, activity, and need-based scholarships available. This is always a good place to start as these scholarships have a very small pool. They're limited just to the students that go to the school. You hopefully are going to that school, so you would automatically be eligible to apply for those. Next, the government, depending on where you live, there may be some scholarships available for you. For example, I'm from Michigan. I know that in Michigan, if you're a student there, there's scholarships based on your SAT scores, based on whether you were in foster care or if you had a parent who was a police officer or a veteran. This really depends on the state. Your local government may also have it. So your city may have a couple scholarships you can apply for. So I always recommend looking there next, as these are ones that are usually very reliable. Finally would be private organizations. This is the broadest source of scholarships you'll find. In this category, I include employers. So your parents' employer might have scholarships that you can apply for, or your own employer might have some college assistance you might be eligible for. Other than that, nonprofits will often host scholarships either for the local community or a national scholarship or state scholarship competition. Additionally, just other companies, even if your parents are not employed by them, might offer a scholarship that you can apply for. These scholarships, however, are very spread out and can be very hard to find at times. So next, we're going to talk about some places to start. So my first place I recommend starting, let me just put my light back up. Starting would be at your school. The reason I recommend this, as someone who worked in a school, I often received scholarship information that I could share with my students and connect them with resources to help them pay for college. With that, I recommend reaching out to your guidance counselor if you have one, or see if your school has a scholarship office or a specific scholarship posting, as this will be a great way to find scholarships vetted. Usually, most local scholarships will reach out to counselors first to promote them. And often a scholarship may require a school nomination anyway, so you'll be needing to talk to your counselor and your principal to complete that form. After that, as I said, many employers offer college funding. So if you are working a job right now, I recommend seeing what options they have. Additionally, I talk to your parents and see if they know if their company offers a scholarship that is available to dependents. These employer scholarships are great because I think they usually will have smaller pools, and also they're limited on who to apply. After that, I put your coaches. I use coach in a very broad sense. This might be your athletic coach as the most obvious, but I would also think maybe if you're in band or choir or orchestra, your instructor for that. If you do robotics or quiz bowl or some other academic related club, reach out for the faculty advisor for that. The reason I say start here is they might be aware of or be reached out to by organizations offering scholarships specifically for students who participate in those activities. Athletics, very common, have scholarships maybe through your state athletic association. I know if you did First Robotics, they have millions of dollars of scholarships, and your coach or mentor or faculty advisor could be the great connection to those scholarships and make sure you're applying to all the ones you're eligible for. Finally, I think when in doubt, look online. Pretty much every scholarship will put their stuff online and have a way for you to submit your application online. Usually they'll have a website. So if you know a scholarship, or if I learned of a scholarship, I would just Google that scholarship and it would connect me with the website so I can get more information on how to apply. The one thing with starting to go onto online scholarships, however, is to be aware that sometimes there will be scams that might try to bring you in to steal your information, steal money from you with no intent of helping you pay for college. My tips to avoid these kind of scams would be, first, you should never have to pay money to apply for a scholarship or submit the FAFSA. The FAFSA is a free document. You might have a preparer, but there's a lot of information online to submit it yourself. There's a lot of helplines they offer to submit it yourself for free. So I recommend, when it comes to applying for scholarships, submitting a FAFSA, don't pay money for it. If you're paying money to apply for a scholarship, it most likely will be a scam. After that, just be conscious of the information you're sharing in applications. The specific ones I will say are social security number and credit card. You should never have to share a credit card number when you're applying to a scholarship. The social security number can be a little different, as some schools might require it. Some school scholarships might require it just based on to determine if you're a citizen and you're eligible for the money. If you are concerned, though, I'd reach out and ask why they're using it. If they don't give you a good answer, most likely that's a scam scholarship and you don't want to apply for it. Finally, the Better Business Bureau is a really great tool to confirm whether or not a company offering a scholarship is actually legitimate. So if you have some concern, I'd recommend looking on there, see what people say about it. With that, also just talk to your counselors, talk to friends, talk to teachers, other adults. They can help you determine whether or not an organization is legitimate and whether or not that scholarship might be a scam. On the side, though, of trying to help you avoid scams as much as possible, here's a couple reliable sources I recommend sticking to as you start your search for scholarships. FastWeb, I know, is really the go-to. It is a search engine for scholarships. It's really nice because you can create an account, put information about yourself in there, such as GPA, SAT, activities, and they will start recommending scholarships you'll be eligible for. A lot of these will be national scholarships, which do have larger applicant pools and means they can be harder to get. However, the easiest way not to get a scholarship is not to apply. So even if it's a large applicant pool, I still recommend submitting the application, because the only way to get scholarship monies is if you're actually applying for them. Next one is Going Merry, which is a new up-and-coming scholarship search engine like FastWeb. I like it because you can actually fill out the information and they will submit scholarships for you. Your school might also be using Going Merry already to put some of the local scholarships. So I'd also, when talking to counselor, ask if they're using something like that, because local scholarships naturally have smaller applicant pools, meaning that you're going to have a better chance at receiving it over a national scholarship. Finally, I recommend checking your school website, either your high school website or then when you know what college you're going to, your college website. Usually schools will curate lists of scholarships that are sent their way. This way you can know these scholarships are legitimate. You have a point of contact at your school to help fill out the application. And usually they're tailored specifically to the students at the school. You're not, with FastWeb, you might like apply to a scholarship and realize, oh, it's only available to students within a specific state. If your school is doing their due diligence, they will make sure that these scholarships they're advertising to you are specifically the ones that are best for you. Okay, so as you're going through this search, you're going to be bombarded with thousands of scholarship opportunities, and you'll want to make sure to have a way to easily recall which scholarships you're eligible for, know what progress you've made on them, and make sure they're submitted by the deadline. It takes a long process to search for scholarships, so I recommend breaking into pieces. Spend a couple hours each month, each week to do scholarship work. Maybe put aside time on a weekend or like between school and a practice where you just search through scholarships, record the information, and then update the ones that you've submitted when you're doing it. The big thing is, I would say, keep track of deadlines. This way you can take full advantage of the time you have. If you find a scholarship that's due in May, you can start it in November, but I don't recommend actually submitting it until you get to May. This way you have the most time to focus on the application, put your most effort into it, get people to look at it. As I say later on here, ask early for your recommendations. If you ask early, gives your recommenders plenty of time to fill out a good recommendation for the farm, and you're not rushing at the last second to get it done. Also, in the end, I recommend having someone you trust review your applications, and the more time you give them, the better results you'll get out of it. So on this slide here, I have what I usually shared with my students as a scholarship organizer. This is a very bare bones one. You can obviously add more columns based on how you like to organize stuff. This might be also similar to how you're organizing your college applications to make sure stuff is done. And you might put these both in the same place as different sheets on the same spreadsheet. So with each scholarship, I recommend keeping track of the requirements. Obviously, you should keep track of the deadlines. And then the last one I always recommend is just a progress column. This is a way that you can keep track of maybe things that you've already done, when you've submitted it, maybe set a deadline for you to actually get started on it. As you see here, the first scholarship on this scholarship organizer has already been submitted with an essay, which meant in the next scholarship, the essay was already done and the FAFSA just needed to be completed. As you also see scholarships, maybe with a specific recommendation, it's good to ask early so that person knows to fill it out. But the deadline, maybe we don't submit the application until it's closer to the date. Finally, college scholarships will usually require you to have submitted an application already. And that's an important thing to keep progress on, just so you know, to submit that application before the deadline. Here I gave the example of U of M, which had a November 1st deadline for their college application, yet a May 1st deadline for their scholarship application. I made a note, submit that application by November 1st, but then submit the rest of the materials by May 1. Finally, essays, it might be good to put on topics on what the topic is to know if you have shared essays or if you need to write a new one. Okay, Now we're going more into the actual crafting for the application. And just as a reminder, I have in the corner, if questions come up, make sure to write them on. We'll have a Q&A at the end, just so we can answer any questions you may have about the scholarship process. So first, in this section, we're going to talk about what things you might need to apply for a scholarship. After that, I'm going to give us some discussion of what I think goes into a good scholarship essay. This comes from my experience being on scholarship committees. I'll share somewhat the insight of what conversations a scholarship committee has. And then finally, I'm going to go over some places you can reach out to for help in the case that you need it. So the common requirements for scholarship, there's 4 main areas I broke it into. You might have scholarships that have other parts to it, but usually it'll be very self-explanatory from there. So the first one is going to be your grades. Usually this will be in the form of a transcript. As someone who worked in a counseling office, transcripts were really annoying because most students waited to the last second to submit them, and it takes a while for us to send it out as transcript. So if you know you're applying for a scholarship, submit that request very early on so you can make sure it's in the hand. Often places will accept the transcript before the actual scholarship is submitted. If not, you can also just request a copy of your scholarship for yourself. Usually they'll require an unofficial transcript, which means you can just attach a PDF that you got after your last grades were posted. After your grades, usually scholarships will ask for a resume or just some written history of your work experience or volunteer experience. With that, if you haven't already made one, I recommend when you have some free time, do that before you maybe even start your search for scholarships. This way you can have a nice one prepared and you can easily complete this requirement. I always keep an updated version of my resume for things like scholarships. I applied for fellowships now that I'm in grad school, which are similar to scholarships. And it was just very great to say, oh, this needs a resume. Just upload the one I have, not have to spend any time on it. Another tip with the resume is creating something called a master resume. This usually resumes are expected to be 1 page, but with a master resume, I just say put all your experience down and then select which ones to keep when you submit a scholarship for your scholarship or college application. After that, which we'll spend more time talking about, is your essay or essays. These will be very similar to the essays you might submit for your college application. And I view this very much as your way to tell your story to the scholarship committee. You might not have a chance to do an interview. You may have an interview, you may not. If you don't have an interview, the essay is the only place you can directly talk to the people deciding the scholarship. So make sure you use that opportunity to tell your story. Finally, scholarships may require letters of recommendation. As I said before, make sure you're asking for these early. Give your recommenders plenty of time to write all great things about you. And then always, always, always send a thank you note afterwards. This can be as easy an email or stopping in person to say thank you. I highly recommend, if you really want to impress your recommenders, write them a letter, write them a thank you card. They usually don't expect that out of our generation. So they'll be very appreciative when you thank them for writing your letter. So now on to the topic of essays. So you most likely have already started thinking about college essays, and now you're worried, oh, scholarship essays, I have a whole new thing to worry about. I'll tell you the good news. Your scholarship essays and your college application essays will look very similar in many times. As I said before, your essay is really your way to talk directly with the provider. In the committees I served on for scholarships, we usually didn't have the chance to interview students. And while we knew things about the students, this essay was a great way for us to learn things that maybe we hadn't learned of the student, or hear how the student has overcome in their own words the challenges they face. The big thing with these essays is you should always try to focus on answering the question first. Usually they will give you a direct prompt to write to. Yet, while there's that direct prompt they want, there's always that hidden prompt of why is why are you as a student going to be successful in college? Why will this scholarship help you with your college dream? So always try to connect back to that broader idea of I'm telling my story, but I'm telling it in a way that shows them I am ready for this college experience and I'm going to be, their scholarship is a good investment in my future. One big lesson I've learned over the years of applying for scholarships and helping students apply for scholarships, committees often will often like a narrative style over an analytical style. What this means is really focus on telling a story instead of writing that like research essay you might be used to for your English language arts class. This is a place where you can use I pronouns. You can really integrate your voice into it and make sure you're using that opportunity. Again, I put this disclaimer at the bottom. This can vary a lot between scholarships and what they require. Always make sure you, as I'll say bullet point 2, always make sure you're answering the question first. There's been scholarships I know that students of mine have applied to where it is just talk about why it's bad to text while drive. This is a place where they're most likely looking for a more analytical essay to it. They might like some of that narrative, like maybe talking your personal experience, but that isn't your place to say, oh, texting is driving is bad, and this is how I overcame failing my math test. Again, answer that question, use your best judgment. If you're confused, maybe ask a teacher for help on getting that essay started, or even reach out to the scholarship committee and seeing kind of what they're expecting. With the essays, there's a couple places I source students for help. The big one is your English teacher. You're already writing essays for their classes. They've helped you write with your writing style before. They're great resources to review your essays. Big thing though, as similar to letters of recommendation, it's really, really important to ask them early on for this support, as they have busy lives. Usually scholarships are due at the time where grades are due and final exams are being done. So if you ask early enough, you can maybe catch them in that gap. Additionally, everyone asks people to help at the end. If you ask early, that gives them more time to help you with your essay and actually serve as a partner in writing that essay. I've had English teachers help me where we met 3 times on one essay to get it to the perfect quality. And it really helped me with those applications when I got them done that way. Also kind of tied to that English teacher, the cost essays you're writing in class might be good connections and might serve you well for a scholarship. So if you don't know where to start, maybe look at essays you've written before, especially those more narrative essays. And that can be a great starting off place for you to find what you want to write and really tell your story well. After your English teacher, friends, family members, even other subject teachers you trust are great people to look at your essays. I usually had a parent look at my essays. I had siblings look at my essays. I had my best friends look at my essays. One tip, if you have a good group of friends that you trust their English skills, have an essay group where maybe 2 or 3 of you come together one weekend and you share essays with each other and help each other, have a little writing workshop between the 3 of you to help figure out how they can tell their stories and how you can tell your story. The reason I say people you trust, they can tell you if you're being inauthentic in your essay. They can tell you, hey, you went over this. Why aren't we talking about that? And actually help you maybe be more honest in the essay. Finally, as I mentioned a little bit before, reuse your essays wherever you can. There's a lot of essays that have the same prompt, and you should really feel no shame for if you have a good essay answering how you overcame a challenge, using that essay from multiple scholarships to answer the prompt. The big thing is just make sure you're answering the question. Make sure, even if they are close, that maybe if there's references to things that work for one scholarship, you take them out for the other. Make sure if they want to highlight a certain aspect of it, you highlight it in the one essay. Just use your best judgment. Use your peers to help you say, hey, am I answering this actual prompt? Okay, so we went a lot into scholarships. That is a very prevalent way of helping pay for college. However, it's not your only way. There's many other forms of financial aid available, even before you apply for student loans. So, in this section, we're going to talk about two other ways. So, specifically, we're going to talk about grants, which are very similar to scholarship but have some distinct differences. Uh, After that, we're going to talk about getting a campus job and how work study funding can help you find that job. Or even if you don't have work study as part of financial aid, how you could still find campus employment. And then last, just the overview. I'm going to talk about how you can access the financial aid still available to you at your college. With financial aid, I divide financial aid into three main kinds. The first being grants and scholarships. This is the free money that you don't have to pay back after graduation. The only condition usually is either participating in a certain activity, keeping up a GPA, stuff like that. Again, this is completely free money. Once you graduate, they're not going to come back and ask you to pay for it. We already talked a lot about scholarships. Now we're going to talk about grants. After grants and scholarships, you have what's called work study. This is money that is earned over the semester but isn't paid back in the end. The big thing about it being earned over a semester is you need to know, while it's included often in your financial aid package, this isn't money that you get up front. You'll have to front the cost for this money, and then you'll earn it as you work your job. Finally will be student loans, which I believe you talked more in depth last week with Fiveable. But this, again, is money that you borrow and have to pay back after graduation. Today, we're focusing mostly on the ones you don't have to pay back. Because as much as you can minimize that student loans, you'll be in better success afterwards. However, I'd like to acknowledge that student loans are useful if you borrow them responsibly. And that's just really making sure you're looking at what's required in those packages before you take out a loan. Okay, so grants. As I have been saying over and over again, a grant is similar to a scholarship. The main difference, however, is grants are often automatically based on your college application, FAFSA, and then the CSS profile if it's required. What this means is it usually is need-based instead of a scholarship. So your grant might be because you have financial need. Your school might have a tuition guarantee program and it'll be paid through via grants that way. Or maybe it's a grant just because you're an alumni and they have an alumni program, or you went through a certain program at this, like an early college information program. So yeah, the grant also typically is both government and institutional aid. Government is the more popular, so you'll have things like the Pell Grant, and which comes through the FAFSA and the federal government. You might have some state grants available. Depending on your school, they might have enough money in their endowment to have an institutional grant, which gives you even more money to help pay for school. But the big thing you need to know about grants is these are automatic, fully dependent, though, on you submitting your FAFSA. So if you haven't got enough reasons to submit your FAFSA yet, know that this automatic money is another reason you won't be able to access it unless you do. While they're usually need-based, again, I say they are some grants that aren't. So even if you think you're not going to get Pell Grants or other money from the FAFSA, still submit it so you can be eligible for these other automatic grants and scholarships your college might be offering. So grants can be a little elusive to find out. Usually college aid websites will just say, grants are based on student need and not give you like what the maximum grant is or what your grant is able for. I'd like to show you a little secret that is not really a secret, but is kind of hard to find on many college websites. It's called the net price calculator. This is something that the federal government requires every college and university to offer students. You can easily find it by typing your college's name and then just putting net price calculator after it in Google. Here is one from the University of Michigan that I used often with students. What it asks is a lot of the basic information you might be filling out in the FAFSA, so things like dependency status, household income, assets, all of that stuff, maybe questions about whether or not you're in state or out of state, what your GPA and SRT are, and all that. And then after you submit it, they give you a estimate of what your financial aid will look like at the college. I really highlight estimate. Uh, this isn't going to be your exact amount. A lot of factors come into play determining it, but I've found it has been very helpful for students to somewhat visualize what aid they might already be eligible for at schools. You can start this now. You don't have to submit an application to use a net price calculator. I think it's a great way to determine as you're applying for schools which schools are going to be those good financial safety schools. That way, you know before you apply which ones are going to be affordable for you, and kind of what money to expect, and maybe what gaps you expect to fill. If you find a school like, oh, I'm not going to get any grants, you can still apply. Just know that, hey, I'm going to have to get a lot of scholarships. I'm going to have to get a lot of support. I might have to take out loans. But this might also reveal like, oh, I thought I wasn't able to go to a school like U of M or an Ivy League, but see that, oh, they actually give me a very good financial aid package. Hopefully that will encourage you to apply to some more diverse schools and maybe have a more open conversation with your family and your parents about college affordability and what actually is obtainable for you. Again, this is an estimate. You need to make sure to fill your FAFSA. Anything on here usually will be dependent on getting that FAFSA in. So use this to estimate, but make sure you follow through, submit your FAFSA, submit any other paperwork they ask for before you think, oh, I'm good to go. Okay. Part of your financial aid package, which you most likely haven't even looked at that yet, but will be possibly what's called work study. So work study is a federal program. This will be included in your financial aid award. A financial aid award is just a document your college puts together to tell you what aid you qualify for and give you a picture of what money you still need to put together to pay for college. While it's included in that aid award, and often they'll say like on these aid award letters, oh, after all your aid, you have this cost left to pay. Do know that work study is unique in that it's not paid out at the beginning. It is paid out over the year because you will be working a job to earn it. What work study basically is a guarantee to the employer that the federal government has money to pay them for employing you. So truly, it is subsidizing your work at another place. It is most often earned through a campus job, which means you should really look through a camp. If you're offered it and you want to take it out, you should look through your campus's job board or job resources to see what opportunities are available for you. I'll say the most common uses in my experience of work study have been through jobs in the dining halls, maybe jobs running the information desk, event staff. Many colleges have large public events and they hire students to staff it. Maybe it's working in your department office or working at a campus library. There's a variety of different jobs. There also might be unique opportunities at your college. At my college, we had an undergraduate research program, which you could use work study with. What this would be is you'd be doing research with a faculty member, usually directly related to what you're studying, and getting paid for it. Which I find, if that is an option, or if you maybe have campus, like your department offers these unique experiences that can help your resume as well as help pay for college, I would jump on those right away. Any job helps your resume, but ones specifically related to the area you're interested always are very beneficial and look really good if you're applying to jobs, competitive internships, grad school in the future. So make sure you look for those. Work study, some campus jobs will require you to have work study to be able for. Otherwise, some jobs will accept you as an employee even if you don't have work study as part of your financial aid package. So you have two options when it comes to jobs in college, working on campus or off campus. I always encourage working on campus even if you don't have work study. The reasons with that are On-campus jobs are required to work around your class schedule, like required by the university. So you'll never have like a shift scheduled during exam. Often some of these jobs are very flexible, especially like if you're working at a library job or an information desk. The information desk jobs I've worked, we could do homework when we were not helping students or parents, which allowed me to have some good study time, which I was actually getting paid for. So always, like, I would say when you're looking at campus jobs, know the benefits. They're also usually closer to where you're already studying. You don't have to drive. You don't have to get on the bus. You're already there, and they'll be the most flexible option you have. Otherwise, I know students who have taken off-campus jobs. They've worked for them. However, I know they had a lot more stress simply because they had to worry about commuting. They had to worry that their shifts were not scheduled. So make sure you take that in mind before you apply for a job. See what actually you have time for. My final advice with this work study component is with any job, especially starting right away in college, take at least a month to get used to what college is. College is way different than high school. Study expectations are way different. Your time management is going to be more important. If you're finding in that first month, oh, I have no time, I'm spending all this time studying, all this, less that, maybe reconsider taking a job. Otherwise, you might find, oh, I have plenty of time. I can definitely fit in maybe 20 to 30 hours a week. Do that. 30 hours is usually the max a school will allow you to do. But really take into consideration what your time is worth. Make sure you're not stressing yourself out by taking a job, and really put that forethought before you take on another commitment. Okay. So we're now towards the end of my presentation. So I just wanted to give some final things about reviewing before we go into the Q&A. So the big piece of advice, if you want to learn from any of this, is really starting early. The place I recommend starting right away with is go to your counselor. You should already be going to your counselor anyway for college applications, since they have to fill out a counselor report. Go to them, talk about maybe opportunities they're aware of, talk about what they think might be good things for your college application essays and your scholarship essays. See if they have thoughts on just what you're writing down and what they think from their professional experience, what your story can really be. After that, I'll say write an essay that really tells your story. Use your personal voice. A tip that I just remembered, which I didn't bring up before, read your essay out loud. Make sure it sounds like it's something you would read out loud or feel comfortable telling in an interview to someone, and then have others read it before submitting. I've had friends who are brutally honest with me, just let me know, hey, I think you're you're not telling your story in the best way, or maybe like this doesn't sound like you. This is your place to put a professional foot forward, but also put your personal foot forward, and making sure that you have an essay that sounds like you, but sounds like a refined professional version of you will really help your chances with the scholarship committee. Finally, use that net price calculator to estimate your aid now, and then see what unique jobs may be available on campus. When I was looking at colleges, I looked for ones with undergraduate research because I knew that was something I wanted to do. If you can go in ahead of time and know of those opportunities, you'll be ready right away on day one to pursue them. Using the net price calculator, you won't be surprised when you get your financial aid package. And then also, just this kind of is leaning more into the college application essay part. Being aware of your college and letting them know in your college applications about what resources you hope to use there really can help them visualize you as a student at that college. So do your research, make sure you know what colleges you're wanting to go and why they're going to be good fits for you, because this can really help you convince admissions to let you in, and then convince a scholarship committee there to give you a scholarship and help you pay for that experience. So with that review, that is the end of the formal part of my presentation. Now we have some time for question and answer. I'm going to go back a couple slides. Just give you a couple seconds if you want to use the QR code to get to the place to post your questions. Additionally, there's a link in the description as well as a link at the beginning of the discussion thread on this video for you to submit your questions. So I'm going to take a quick drink of water and then pull up the questions so I can see what questions we have. Okay, so the first question I had was, do I have any tips for international students? So with international students, I'll also expand this just because I don't know the audience, everyone in the audience. I'll expand this to undocumented or DACA students, as much of my advice here is going to be similar, but there's some differences. If you're an international student, there is going to unfortunately be less financial aid available to you at an American institution. You'll not be able to submit the FAFSA in the United States, so you're not going to be able to access federal grants or like state grants or stuff like that. So with that, I highly recommend just looking for scholarships. A big part of looking at scholarships is making sure you know who are eligible for scholarships. They'll explicitly say if you have to be a U.S. citizen or not. Some scholarships will maybe be open to Canadian or Mexican students as well, but it unfortunately is harder. That's why going international will unfortunately be harder to get financial aid. This is a place you can also look in your home government and see if they offer opportunities for you to get scholarships to study abroad. Some places will have them. They might have cultural exchanges or stuff like that. Also, just look for scholarships in your home country. That's another easy way to do it. But unfortunately, there is less opportunities for international students. Things like grants in work study. Work study, I think, definitely will not be available. You can still work a campus job, but the grants usually are, at least government grants are restricted to domestic students. Some colleges are more broad with their international grant, their institutional grants. I bring up U of M as that's my experience. U of M has grants available for international students. They have grants available for undocumented students. And you should, at that point, really contact the financial aid office and see what information they need for you. I know with undocumented DACA students, they'll usually have you fill out a paper FAFSA because you can't submit an online FAFSA. Other international students, they might have other paperwork for you to fill and get it. Also, sorry, one other tip that just came to mind for international students, reach out to a college's international student office if they have one. They will have scholarships. These are going to be staff members that are directly there to help you with those questions you may have. Additionally, you'll want to reach out to them about visas and all of that anyway. So it's good after you submit the application to reach out to them and start learning about their processes before you get there. Yes. The next question. Can scholarships and grants be used to pay for college, for books and other school supplies, or only for classes? That is a really good question. So the answer is yes, but also no, unfortunately. And I'll explain why. So when it comes to financial aid, your FAFSA will create what's called your expected family contribution. This expected family contribution is something financial aid offices use then to determine what age you're actually eligible for. What they then compare this to is the cost of attendance for a college. Cost of attendance is a number that includes tuition, room and board, as well as books and other school supplies. With books and other school supplies, what they then do to determine your aid eligibility is they take the cost of attendance, subtract the expected family contribution, and that is the amount of aid you are eligible for. In that case, then, if your expected family contribution is low enough, you're eligible aid might go above the cost of tuition and the cost of room and board. If you then get aid that covers that or get scholarships over the cost of tuition, over the cost of room and board, the school will issue a check, which then you can use for books and other school supplies. However, if your expected family contribution is too high, their expectation might be that you are paying for books because your eligible aid might only cover the tuition and stuff. So when you get that financial aid letter, look, if you go any money you go above tuition and room and board or any of those direct costs you're paying to a college can be used to pay for these other expenses. But again, it's really dependent on what aid you get from the college, what scholarships you have available, and whether or not they will let you get more on money than the tuition. The big thing you need to know is if your eligible aid determined by that cost of attendance minus expected family contribution is the most aid a school is allowed to give you. So if you come in with a financial aid package that covers your full financial need, but then you bring in a bunch of scholarships, they unfortunately will tick away first at student loans, but then work study and institutional and government grants to balance out to make sure you're not getting more than eligible aid. If, however, you get scholarships beyond your eligible aid, you can earn, they aren't going to take that scholarship money away. So if you get enough scholarships to pay fully for your education, you can do that. But that's where I recommend looking at your financial aid, talking to financial aid office, seeing, hey, how, if I get this scholarship, how will it affect my aid? Will I get more money out of it, or will it just detract my aid from elsewhere? That's a conversation to have with your financial aid office because it really depends on your individual situation. Okay. So the next question is, if I don't qualify for assistance through FAFSA, what is the likelihood that I qualify for a scholarship? So this is always the tough question. I haven't answered as much because many of my students were low income. This is a question that can be hard to answer. If you don't qualify for assistance through FAFSA, you definitely can still qualify for a scholarship. It will most likely be a merit-based scholarship over a need-based scholarship. So merit-based scholarships look purely at academic ability or athletic ability or artistic ability or participation in an activity or something like that. If it's a merit-based, some merit-based have a need component, others don't. Many schools, academic scholarships don't depend on need, so you definitely can qualify for those. But I think it's really just important in looking in that eligibility of a scholarship, look what the criteria is. They will usually explicitly say we look at financial need, or they don't look at financial need. Often scholarships will ask for that FAFSA, and that will be the way they determine it. But again, even if you don't qualify for assistance through the FAFSA, you really still should fill it out. I know you'll be like, why am I filling out this paperwork? I can't qualify for aid anyway. Many colleges won't distribute any aid until that FAFSA is submitted. So even if you get an athletic scholarship or an academic scholarship that isn't need-based, they won't distribute that money until they receive a FAFSA. So even if you think you're not going to qualify for assistance through FAFSA, make sure you're submitting it. Look for those merit-based scholarships. Look for scholarships at your parent's employer, and then just see financial need. Also, the thing is, even if you don't qualify for assistance, you might have a compelling case of why it's a financial need. On paper, your family might have a lot of assets to be able to put towards your college, but maybe in reality, that isn't truly the case. Or maybe the FAFSA doesn't represent your true family situation. I know for a lot of families, because of the way the FAFSA is submitted, COVID changed their family situation where on the FAFSA paperwork, they wouldn't qualify for insurance. But when you actually get into their family story, they would. So make sure if you talk to your financial aid office, find what ways you can bring down your financial aid. Financial aid officers are not in the business of denying, they have to deny students, but their real focus is to make sure college students can get into the college, afford it and not get into massive debt in the end. They're there to help you. They're not there to hinder you. So make sure you're having those conversations regularly with the financial aid office, as they're going to be your best asset to tell you your unique situation instead of like relying on some generic website or like workshop. So next question is, if the scholarship essay prompt is identical to the admissions essay prompt, does it look bad if you just submit the same essay for both? I will say it will look bad if the same group is looking at both of them. That usually is not the case. So I have actively told students for like the essay they submit in the Common App, if it's similar to the prompt for the Community Foundation, use that essay. Because they're not knowing you're submitting to both, and it's your story. There's only a number of ways to tell your story, and if you've told it the best way possible, why not use that again to tell the best way? The big thing I will say is, again, make sure you're answering the question. If your scholarship essay is talking about how you overcame challenges and why this college is a good fit for you, make sure you cut that part out before you submit it. Also, usually you're submitting your scholarship essays in November, but then submitting your college application essays in November, but then submitting your scholarship essays in January, February, and March. I recommend taking another look at it. I reuse essays all the time for applications, yet I always reread it before I submit it to just make sure, hey, is there any way I want to represent things? Or is there any maybe grammar things I didn't catch the first time? Essays, I think, should be a work in progress. So I recommend, if you do reuse essays, still reread them and make changes each time you submit it. But you shouldn't have shame if you're reusing an essay that tells your story in the best way and answers a similar prompt. I mean, I'll be honest. When I was applying to college, when I applied to certain colleges, they had the exact same prompt. I submitted the same essay. I just made sure I changed the college name at the beginning and changed certain details of it. Again, they're not going to compare it. The only thing I'd say risky is if, like, in the same application you submit the same, like if you submit, if your application has an essay for admissions, but then a separate submission for scholarship, I recommend make some changes. But otherwise, I think there's no problem with reusing content that you've already put together. Okay, so the question I have next is, do you typically see more scholarship opportunities at private or public schools? And with this, I will say it's very much depends. I will say from experience, usually private schools will have more scholarship opportunities, but that is also because private schools have higher tuition costs. So while private schools have more scholarship opportunities, it usually balances out to the place that for any given student, the cost at a private school will be similar to the cost at a equally ranked public school. This isn't always the case. In Michigan, we're lucky to have many public universities that have tuition guarantees, which means if you reach a certain financial aid level and you apply to this school, like, your tuition is covered, which is something that the private schools are not able to offer. However, I had students who got better financial aid deals from our local private school than the close by super affordable public school. So it truly is dependent on your situation. This is where I highly recommend looking at that net price calculator, because the net price calculator takes into account a private school costing more than a public school on paper. And will give you, like, actually, okay, what does this school cost me? Sure, this school on the website says $50,000 a year, but with this scholarship and with this grant, it's going to be comparable to the public school. So on paper, there's going to be maybe more opportunities at a private school, but truly in the end, they balance out, and you really should use the net price calculator to determine your actual unique situation and what aid is offered to you. Okay, so that looks like the amount of questions in the audience. If you still have questions, definitely use the links to submit them now. But just as I'm waiting, just wanted to thank you for joining in today. Also, reminding you like this shouldn't be an individual process. It might seem like this, but know that you most likely have a strong community of support around you at your school or in your family or within your friend group. You should definitely always reach out to people for help with things like this. And really, a final piece of advice is use this place to tell your story. If you have something that you've really has impacted you, has really guided where you are, feel comfortable sharing it. I had many students who had great stories, but just didn't want to sound like pity cases. Uh, but this is the place, like, you're not a pity case. You're just telling your story and telling what has influenced you to get where you are. So uh, be honest, share what you're comfortable with. You don't have to share everything on the page. Be discerning with what you share. Make sure it's professional or at least isn't like showing you doing illegal activities, unless your story is how I did an illegal activity, but I overcame it and now I'm on the right side of the law. Uh, and just be honest and make sure you're being authentic and telling your true story. But yeah, we have a couple minutes left. So any of those last questions, make sure you drop them into the link. I'll also just go back so you can have a QR code as well if you need to submit them. Yeah. Okay. So looks like there's not that many new questions. So I think we're going to call it a night. Thank you again for joining. Make sure to continue to connect with Fiveable and stay in touch. Their social media is here on the screen. Also, if you have a question, we have the email that you can shoot there. But otherwise, thank you for joining and good luck with your scholarship search. Have a good night.